What's up, guys? This is Heiss, and today we have an interesting story from railroading history for you from the Union Pacific, that time that sheep derailed a big boy. There's a couple steps in there, but it really paints a picture of what railroading was like in that era and what the safety procedures were like and how it's so different than railroading today. And unfortunately, it led to a pretty bad accident, and there's some pretty gnarly pictures of it. And of course, anything with the big boy is big news, right? So I recently had some friends in town, and 4005 is actually in Denver at the Forney Museum of Transportation. So it made a real easy visit for us to just go on down and go see it. And I was reminded of this story of the wreck, and I thought it would be cool to share with you guys because I don't know how common knowledge this wreck is. The date is April 27th, 1953. Big Boy 4005, or 5-person crew, the 62 cars, the caboose, were heading downgrade west of Wamsutter, Wyoming, a sprawling metropolis to the west of Cheyenne. And they're heading downgrade, moving along as if nothing's out of the ordinary. Track speed, 9 a.m., thereabouts. At the same time, 5 miles west of the Big Boy is the section gang. There's a foreman and 4 of his men out working. They came on the pop car, and they were out doing some maintenance of way on the track. The MOW crew got flagged down by a shepherd who had his entire flock of sheep with him, and he was asking how they could guarantee safe travel for the big flock of sheep across the tracks. And so the foreman said, okay, well, we'll send flagmen out. We'll line the switches into the siding to warn any trains coming ahead to slow down, and then our flagmen will be able to bring them to a stop. So the foreman sends his men out, and they go to line the switches, and they're going to flag down any train that's on the approach to make sure that they could stop. Because at this time, there wasn't a way to clip into a radio or radio the locomotive. There was nothing of that sort. There was no dispatch to radio to, not at least without a telegraph connection or something of that sort, wayside phone. There's nothing they could do to contact the trains, so you were reliant on having someone physically out there far enough ahead that the train could stop by the time it got to the obstacle, in this case, a herd of sheep. So he sends his folks out, and the idea being, okay, well, if we line the switch, that way the signals in advance will say, hey, approach. So trains that are on the approach know, okay, I need to slow down first. That way the guys who are walking out there with a flag don't have to walk so far, and they can actually get to the point where the train can slow down and stop by the time that the sheep need to get across the track and all that. Now, when you're working section crew, you get what's called a lineup. It's all the trains that are going to be running through your territory where you're working, so you know when you need to have your motor car off the tracks. Otherwise, as we saw in the Rio Grande safety video, you end up having a train plow through your motor car. It's a fun watch if you haven't seen it. And so the foreman knew that there was 4 trains on the approach, 2 from each direction at different times, coming relatively soon, which is why he was trying to afford this protection, because it's a big herd of sheep. However, the timing of all of this was not the best. There's a quote from the head-end brakeman. Recall on a 5-person crew, you have an engineer, fireman, head-end brakeman, then your rear brakeman and conductor. So 3 guys up front, 2 in the back. The head-end brakeman lived long enough to be able to convey some information about the wreck. And there's a quote from him from the scene. He threw it right in front of us, the switch. They threw it right in front of us. They didn't give us a chance. I felt the engine rock. I don't know how many times it rocked. The next thing I knew, I felt the steam hitting me in the face, and I thought I was a goner. All I could think of was getting my hands over my face. The brakeman, James Anderton, ended up passing away 2 days later from severe burn-related injuries. The engineer and fireman died on scene because what happened was the section crew threw the switch right ahead of the train. There was nothing they could do. They dumped the air, put it in an emergency, but they hit the switch doing 50 mile an hour, and the engine rolled over on its side, and the first 18 or so cars piled on top of it and made an absolute mess. And the pictures don't even do it that justice of how bad it must have really been. And so they ended up trying to clean things up, take care of business. The rear end crew came up from the rear of the train after they started to see cars go everywhere to see what happened, because there was no communication between front and rear of the train at the time. And then they had to go and protect and flag for the other train behind them and everything, and it was a whole mess. They ended up getting the 4005 back on the rails and towed it back to Cheyenne, where they repaired it, and it got back into service, which is why it's still with us. It was said that it took over 20 to 30 minutes for the steam to finally dissipate from the boiler. It was leaking everywhere. I mean, you talk about 300 psi steam just going straight out to atmosphere. I mean, it's like a blowdown coming out of everything that's leaking. And it took a long time for that to subside, so any help could be given. I mean, just a nasty wreck. And really one of the times. That's not something that we necessarily run into anymore. We still do have operations at slower speeds and in areas like dark territory where trains may operate under this same thing and rely on some sort of flag protection if there is a meet. But it's pretty uncommon, and this is kind of where the basis for modern day train control stuff comes in. I know that the joke all the time is PTC would have prevented this, but PTC could have done a lot had the section crew said, hey, we need to occupy this chunk of track, give us a Form B, and then PTC could inform that Form B. If you had an electric lock on that switch that knew that there was a train on approach, that switch would be approach locked so that that switch couldn't be unlocked and thrown. There's all sorts of things. But perhaps the biggest thing, which makes me giggle, it's at the end of the article from the Forney Museum about this, is that the guy who threw the switch swore up and down that the foreman was the one who opened the switch and everything, and he was not the one to throw the switch and all this. And there was a bit of blame game going on, and Anderton's testimony was able to provide that the details before he passed away. Turns out that section hand had been on the job as a railroader for an hour and 20 minutes. His first day. For first hour and 20 minutes of railroading, and you put one of the biggest locomotives ever built in the dirt and get 3 guys killed. That's a big difference to modern day railroading. This time, there's at least a little bit of training before you get out there. You don't just throw them to the wolves. Hey, this is how you throw the switch. Now go do it. Oops. Yeah. Definitely a tragedy and an interesting story. I really encourage you to go check out the link down in the description to go read the full tale, because I'm leaving some of the details out. But it's one of those things that really shows what old school railroading protection is like. What was the reality? Oh, a dude has to go out there and flag down the train. That's how you're going to make it stop. Not anything automated, not any machines, computers, any of that mumbo jumbo. Somebody has to walk their butt out there, and if he can't get far enough ahead in time, what's going to happen? So ideally you would have had somebody who's trained in place and could have signaled back and flagged down to the folks that were trying to make sheep move across the track to say, hey, this ain't stopping, that's that. And, maybe had a better outcome, but that's one of those things. What are you going to do? So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this story, and make sure you go check it out in the description below as well. And if you're in Denver, go see the 4005. It's neat to see a big boy in a building. It's a really massive object. You walk in and it's just like, that's a lot of train. How can you build a building around something that big? So anyways, thanks for watching, guys.